Mustang, Oklahoma, and then David Bechtel, who's located in Canyon, Texas. In our laboratory, there's 8 people working full-time, and then we have a crew that does some on-farm and helps out with the research projects, and then 1 person that helps with the administrative stuff. So we go to the next slide. Our objective in the presentation today is to review the basics of PEDv, and I realized tonight that nowhere in my presentation did I tell you what PEDv stands for. So I'll do that now. It's porcine epidemic diarrhea virus. We'll talk a little bit about how the PEDv problem has been tackled so click on the next slide. The rapid increases in PED prevalence can be attributed to area spread. So once it got into a farm in an area, it spread very, very quickly to other farms that were close by. But the introductions into new areas, we still probably can't explain to this day. So if you go to the next slide, I took this out of Monsters Inc. and basically using this to talk about how there must be some other pathways or some other routes of transmission, how this virus is, number one, getting into the country, and number two, getting into farms that their biosecurity had been good enough to keep out the major swine pathogens up to this point. So, you know, some of the new information that's coming out is that feed is the viable mode of transmission. And that would certainly explain why we've seen some spread into well-isolated systems, but up to this point in time, had adequate biosecurity for other diseases. So go to the next slide. Some of the basics about PEDv, as I said, it stands for porcine epidemic diarrhea virus, so it causes diarrhea. It's a coronavirus, so it's in the same family of viruses as TGE, or transmissible gastroenteropathy. It's spread the same way as TGE, so think about fecal-oral spread. So the pathogen replicates, the virus replicates in the gut of the pig, and then it's shed in feces. And when other pigs come in contact with the feces is how they become infected. So if you think about biosecurity, you want to break that link between the feces of infected pigs and the oral ingestion of feces by the susceptible pigs. One of the things that makes this disease a lot more difficult than TGE is that it's a lot more stable in the environment. So TGE, within a few hours, at warm temperatures, exposed to sunlight, it'll die off without even needing to use disinfectant. This virus can live for a week at room temperature, so it's much, much more stable. However, it is susceptible to disinfectant, so the principles of cleaning, disinfecting, and allowing to dry, if you do those things well, you can be very effective at controlling this virus. So go to the next slide. The severity of the disease is very much age dependent. So young pigs are the most susceptible. The cells that line their intestine slough off and replicate the virus to a lot higher amounts, and so those pigs are really susceptible to the dehydration that's caused by that disease. There's large amounts of replication in the intestine and shedding in the feces, and then sow immunity and pig immunity too will develop over approximately 14-day period after exposure, and then shedding will start to decrease after that point. Next slide. So there's been probably 2 separate introductions of PED to the country. What we've found, or what we've learned over time, is that there's 2 different genetic types, or 2 clusters, and they're different enough that we know that it wasn't just one introduction that changed. It was 2 different introductions. Both of those viruses have origins in China, so somehow it got from China into the United States. Somewhere along a similar period of time, there was also another coronavirus introduced. It's called Delta coronavirus. It's also relatively new to the country. It looks the same as PEDv, although it's not as severe. Another development since June is that PEDv and all enteric coronaviruses are now reportable. So diffuse watery diarrhea, may or may not have vomiting. And then in your older pigs, it may be very mild, just some looseness that persists for a few days, and some vomiting. So again, it's very much age related, how severe it is, and so in your older pigs, it might be pretty mild, the diarrhea. So for what we know today, you still want to use feedback to get widespread herd exposure if it does get introduced. And then if you have a breeding herd, you want to identify your plan, your contingency plan for field replacements. And then if you can do it, it seems to make sense to wean pigs early. The next slide then, if you do have a break, the current recommendations would be to early wean pigs, feedback the sows, and then decide how you're going to manage your field replacements. Are you going to continuously acclimate your replacements for the foreseeable future? Are you going to close your herd and try to burn out the disease, or you can even do a combination of control methods? The next slide then on early weaning pigs. It appears that pigs do better off the sow since she gets sick and won't be milking normally. So it's better to provide those pigs another source of nutrition with some solid feed. And quick implementation disease from older pigs back to younger pigs. And then monitoring the pigs in the environment for infection will help you gauge your success in doing all those things. The next slide is courtesy of Iowa State. It shows the percent of submissions that have different diseases diagnosed in pigs under 4 weeks of age. And so what I wanted to point out with these next two slides is that one of the unexpected benefits of the PEDv problem is that we have almost wiped out TGE from the swine population. So the incidence of TGE through last winter and then this summer has gone dramatically down. The next slide shows same information but for pigs that are over 4 weeks of age. And you can see where there just hasn't been much TGE in older pigs either since the PED outbreaks. We don't think there's any cross protection between those viruses, so this probably speaks to just how much swine producers stepped up their game with respect to biosecurity. So they improved the things we need to do. That's helped with TGE, and hopefully we'll have some more success with the PED over the next 12 months. So next slide. On the intensive cleaning, this is probably the largest source of variation in how farms recover after they get infected. And this is really about how we motivate change or how we motivate people to do things different. What we've seen with this disease is that just doing what we've always done a little bit better doesn't seem to be adequate. We've really got to start from the ground up and re-engineer, redo all our processes to make them more effective. And what I would say is, to really clean a growing house well after a PED break takes about 10 times the amount of time and labor as what you might have allocated to it before PED. And so that's a big investment. The payback has been the lower mortality that you get with PED control, and then you also get a lot heavier cleaning weights. So that's been kind of the unexpected or surprise benefit from some of the intensive cleaning efforts. The next slide then, we want to develop a standardized plan with auditable steps. So things that help with PED cleanup are having hot water wash. One of the things we've learned is when you're using high pressure power washers, you get a lot of backsplash all around your room. So just like a power wash, if you spend money and you get the works washed, they always have a low pressure rinse, and that's to get that splash back or those particles that the high pressure, disperses throughout the room. You want to use that low pressure rinse to get those all washed down. You want to make sure you allow for drying time. You want to make sure that you're applying disinfectants at the appropriate rates. We've learned that good lighting is very important to good cleaning. It's hard to get things clean if you can't see where the manure or the dirt is. You want to have an inspection step before you're done to make sure that you're getting it as clean as you want to. And there may be other things that you identify on your farm that are important. On the next slide then, related to internal biosecurity, food hygiene, perhaps using aprons, sleeves, and gloves in your growing houses. You want to dedicate materials to every airspace. And a continuously growing farm, when you're using the same supplies or the same clothing or the same equipment between rooms, that becomes a vector for how that disease can spread from older infected pigs back to newly barreled pigs. that's more proactive and more preventative than just looking at output measures of how many pigs have clinical signs. Getting near the end then here, a little bit on some of my thoughts on exhibition management. I think if you can, as much as you can separate growing pigs from the breeding herd, the more you can do that, I think the better off you'll be, because those large losses happen in farrowing. I think you always want to isolate new acquisitions. If you're purchasing new pigs or purchasing replacement builds, isolating them away from your herd, making sure that they can get infected at the farm of origin recently before shipment, or even infected in transit. Same thing, bringing back pigs from a show. They got exposed to other pigs, so indirectly, they're just like a new acquisition of bringing in new animals to your farm. And then if you do have animals that happen to get infected, you might want to think about maintaining negative or naive populations separate from infected and recovered populations. So there's probably going to be pigs that get this disease. Once they recover and stop shedding, there's absolutely nothing wrong with those pigs. Once they stop shedding, they're not a risk. Once virus is eliminated from the site, it's not a risk. So maintaining those populations separate can be an important management tool for getting through this disease. The next slide then has some resources. The National Pork Board at that website has some fact sheets and other information related to PEDv. The American Association of Swine Veterinarians, which I'm a member of, a past board member, develop immunity and stop shedding. So after they stop shedding, then you need to look or utilize an antibody test. And so there are some, it's IFA tests, and then there's some ELISA tests that are under development. Those tests are okay on a population basis. So, if you test multiple animals from a herd, you'll get a good feeling for whether that population has had previous exposure in the past. producers can probably do some of that testing now and have that test cost offset by the government. Now, how long those funds last is anybody's guess, but that's kind of where we're at currently. Is a lot of that's being offset.
Anybody else? Okay, that's all. Thank you for your time.
All right, y'all have a good evening. Thank you.
opens, that is a receptor for this disease. So it's a total mortality of pigs that are on the sow. So it can wipe out a pig crop. The other thing is, it does affect the weaned pigs that we're getting ready to sell as well, where it sets them back 4 to 5 weeks. And then we have to run a lot of electrolytes through them, do a lot of testing as well. So it's not something to be taken lightly. Any questions? Thank you.
Josh, do you know if a pig, say, gets it at 8 weeks of age and gets over it, is there any residual or carryover, or is he?
That's something I think we're waiting to find out. I know that they shed. I know that they shed for a certain one, you say 3 or 4 days is what they'll shed for. But the thing is that you need to remember that thing only has immunity for 4 weeks. So as far as being resistant to it throughout, it won't be. You can break with it again. As far as
What I mean is he going to feed you? If you own a barrow that's had it, is he going to feed like a barrow that hadn't had it?
that's what I don't know. We're trying to figure that out because I know there's a lot of people. And I don't know if this is something that should be brought up, but it's self-infecting to prevent you from breaking with it once you get to the show. And that's something you need to talk to a veterinarian about, somebody that's a lot smarter than I am. But something to consider as well. I totally answered your question on purpose.
You did well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Next, we have Brandon Gunn. He's Executive Vice President of Texas Pork Producers.
Thank you. And appreciate everybody coming out here this evening to try and become more educated on this disease that's affecting so many. We're all a part of this, and so we need to remember that. And just because, say, some of y'all don't raise hogs, and I know some of y'all in here do, but just because you don't have any sows on your place doesn't mean that you're a part of this whole cycle, because you will be traveling. There's sales going on, little pigs, and they're still farrowing. And so y'all can transport it, and that's why we're here to kind of discuss it. But we all need to become educated and knowledgeable on it. One thing to kind of touch on the question of the effects of some older hogs, and I guess we're really also just going to have to wait and see as we progress a little further along this year to see what happens to those show pigs. The question was posed, how are they going to feed? And just some talks that I've had with some other people kind of up in the Midwest and some even here in Texas last year that thought maybe they did get it there prior to some of those last couple major shows we had. We talked about mortality being near 100% in those little pigs. We talked about, and Dr. Daniels discussed, in those older ones, getting a case of diarrhea and kind of setting them back. You have a loss in performance, weight gain. We know these show pigs, it's a kind of, like a pet show, we're building them up, right? And we put a lot of time and effort and feed into them. And you think about them getting affected with this in the sports, what it's going to do to them. It's going to set them back. And what I've been told is that, they're just not going to look the same. We've got ones that we're maxing out day in, day out and working with and getting primed, for the big show. Something like this comes along, it's not going to, kill them, but it's going to set them back, and it's sure enough probably going to take you out to where that hog could have been potential-wise. And so that's something important, even though the death loss isn't going to be there. We start talking about the end result in that show ring, it's going to be a huge difference. A couple of the other things, and really with 3 people talking, I don't want to repeat a bunch of information or whatnot, so we can field some questions, but Josh brought up a good point on the ball caps going in between farms. There's a disinfectant, and there's a handful of them that are very effective out there that have proven through research to be more effective with handling PD and inactivating the virus. One of them comes in an aerosol form, Tetrol. It's held at a handful of feed stores, and I know for a fact at Rowdy Feeds, the sponsor for this evening's deal, they carry it because I've gotten it there. Okay? I was at a farm a couple weeks ago. We had a livestock judging team come in, one of the college judging teams. And so we had put together some biosecurity protocols for them to follow, and one of which, because we know, kind of like y'all going farm to farm, looking at pigs, sometimes these judging teams go from farm to farm in the course of a day. And so what we had is that Tetrol aerosol disinfectant, go on and spray, head to toe, ball cap, whatnot. And again, on the ball cap thing, anything that you can leave in the vehicle, do so. And you know, we all understand it's not a beauty contest when we go look at pigs, so just come as you are. You know, but leave that stuff, because anything that manure can get on is a vector and can transport the virus. Okay? So that's important to realize. So that disinfectant, we had camp this summer. When we came on and off the bus, we sprayed ourselves down. Also, we went into places. One of the things that we did with the judging teams that we recommended, and we understand not everybody's going to do it, and a lot of it comes onto the farms that you're visiting to, they need to be proactive with it, you know, and maybe having some of those disposable boots if you don't, utilizing a foot bath, right, disinfected, because one thing that you have to remember in this virus, there's still so much that's unknown, right? And it's hard to completely get rid of it or protect against it. We got to remember, Dr. Daniels a few months back had told me, and it just always kind of sticks with me, is dilution is part of the solution. And so anything that you can do, we need to do, you know, with the disinfectant, because it's going to help, you know, a little bit of that. We talk about, from y'all's standpoint, you know, Showpigs, going to shows. If we think about a realistic basis, because there's a lot of things that can be done, and when we talk about the commercial farms, they have heightened levels of biosecurity that are unimaginable, really. Like you think, wow, and yet they've had issues with breaking with PEDv. So we very easily could. We're not going to be able to do the same thing in our own farms, in our own little barns that they do. So if we think about ways that we can be realistic in trying to minimize the spread of this disease, one, say we're going to get these pigs and we're going to bring them home. Say you go to a jackpot, right? We all like to go to jackpot shows. Some of us are showing breeding gilts, and we take them to some of these major shows and come back in between. We do need to isolate them, right? We need to isolate them if you can. Get you another pen built if you can, right? If you're able to do that, feed them last, tend to them last. Another thing, when you come back home from any show, because, and I understand if I was growing up, when I was growing up showing, we didn't have an isolation barn or pen. I mean, it was just a small barn with a handful of pens like maybe some of y'all have. So that kind of stuff is difficult. You just got to do as best as you can all the time. I would say that one thing that you can do, it's very much in your power, is to disinfect. Clean, disinfect, ample drying time, right? C, D, and D, one of the keys that Dr. Daniels talked about. So when you do come back from the stock shows, everything you got, right? The trailer, you need to clean out first. You need to wash it, high power pressure wash. You need to disinfect it, and you need to let it sit and dry, preferably in the sun with some warmer temperatures. Your show box, your whips, your sprayers, you know, let's go ahead and do those as well. Now, if you can, which many of us have multiple, you know, hog bats laying around, some sprayers, if you can have one designated for the barn and one designated for your show box, perfect, right? Because what we're going to talk about is establishing a clean line of separation, okay? And that is the line between dirty and clean. So, your farm, consider it clean. Everywhere else outside of it, consider it dirty, you know? Because that's where you're going to pick stuff up at. So anything that goes out into the dirty side, you know, we got that line right here at our place, and that could be what? The entrance to your barn, you know? That could be the trailer. You know, you don't cross that line, right, without having, you know, a set of barn shoes to stay there, you know, some clothes, making sure you change. Your show supplies, when you go from show to show, Keep them there. Still, you want to wash, dry, and disinfect anything that goes to the shows, but you know what? Don't bring them into your clean side, your barn. You want to protect the barn, protect the livestock you got at all costs. And that's another thing. And I'm going to be a little bit random, I understand, so you have to wrangle me in. When we talk about doing anything at all costs, and there's been all kinds of talk about exposing your hogs, right? Exposing your herds, your show pigs, inoculating them. I would say this, and Josh alluded to it, and everybody has, immunity is short-lived. It doesn't last forever on this. You need to do, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but it's my recommendation that we do all we can to prevent. Prevention, prevention, prevention. And fight it as much as we can. There have been people that say, well, shoot, I'm going to get it. We might as well just do it and get it over with. But again, it goes back to immunity being short-lived. The other thing is there's people in the Midwest, right? It's been rampant up there, even in the show pig barns. There's still people that haven't had it. And there's still commercial farms that haven't gotten it. Really? It's by luck, right? You know, praying every night. But you bet it's from being diligent with biosecurity practices. All right? So it is possible, right? And you can do everything right in the world and still get it. But still, if you do everything right, the risk of getting it, right, decreases by a large margin. And that's what we're trying to do. Okay, that's what we're trying to do. I'm trying to think. And anything I say, y'all can just shoot out with some questions. On the testing and reporting deal, we'll let Jay talk about that.
I have a question. While we're talking about the disinfectants, you know, as we're showing jackpots or these, spraying down before we go in, do you recommend us using the bleach, or do you recommend the other one if we spray down before we put our animals in it? You know, because they're chewing on the pins, you know, and we don't know when those pins were cleaned last, or if they even were. So, do we spray those pins first before we go in?
At your home or at the show?
At the show, like jackpots.
At the show? Now, I don't know. There have been shows, and honestly, if it's there, if it's there at the show, then you'll get it and clean. Disinfecting your own bin, probably you're going to do it because the next bin, and then walk into the ring and everything like that. And so, you know, that I don't really see value in, to tell you the truth. Because there's things that we all know that we can't control and things that we can't. We just need to do the best we can with those that we can control.
One thing I just thought about is, even though we sanitize the trailers, our floor mats in our vehicles, they're going to hold them. So I think, you know, after you go to farms or after you go to a show or a sale, sanitize the floor mats.
Yes, very good. And in this deal, inside that folder, what I provided was a couple things that I wrote up. One on biosecurity recommendations for going to farms, buying pigs, and for farms as well, and then validation deal, and then also included some stuff from pork board in there. And what you're going to find is that's great. What you need to do is disinfect. My Suburban has been washed inside and out so many times over the past years. I've gone to places, got me a little VIP membership with a car wash. But the inside is important. You know, taking wipes. You know, if you kept those Lysol wipes in your vehicle, wipe down that steering wheel, right? Go ahead and clean the inside of that vehicle. Those mats, clean them. Now the thing is also when you talk about getting in and out of the vehicle, so put on those disposable boots as you get out, and then as you're getting in, you're taking them off. All right? Again, it's always trying to keep that line of separation in mind and what you can do. And again, it seems like it's a monumental task, and there's a lot to do. But we can get there. But yes, cleaning the entire interior, and that's where we're finding it. The inside cabs of vehicles, they've been swabbed plenty in research and shown to be positive. And so there you go. That's the thing. If we talk about being as, you know, what's the saying? Being as strong as the weakest link or whatnot. If you've got a slip in your biosecurity rule, then that could just kind of do away with all the good that you have done. So again, that is one part, making sure the interior of your cab is clean, you bet. Because when we talk about shoes being, I mean, that's where we go everywhere, and so definitely floorboards of vehicles. Now, the one question, and Jason talked a little bit about the testing, it's important on the reporting side of it because we can't control this or really kind of fight it if we don't know where it's at, right? And that's my belief with it. If we talk about, well, consequences, or whatnot, the way the federal order is set up right now, it is just to work with a veterinarian, all right? So if you have it, you test positive, your farm does, and it's reported, well then you're going to get with a veterinarian, you're going to work with them and establish a herd health plan, a management plan to kind of get you out. We just don't want you spreading it around all willy-nilly, like, you know? But as far as quarantines and restrictions of movement, you know, we don't see that happening. But we do have to know where it's at if we're going to want to fight this properly and have a chance with it. Perfect.
Okay, what we're going to do now is just open up the questions and between Jay and Josh. I want to answer your question a little bit about disinfectant at the shows. I'm one of the superintendents at the Bear Show at San Antonio. When we had the meeting in Amarillo, we were asked the question that night if we were going to do anything extra at the show to prevent this. The thing I can tell you is if we went in there disinfecting the barn and people brought their troughs and their buckets and everything on it, we haven't done any good. What we are going to do is, after the guilt show is over with, that barn will be sprayed. We're going to try to do what we can. The two places in a stock show in the atmosphere you're in the barn that's the most congregational of animals is scales and wash racks. And so those two we will periodically, the San Antonio Stock Show is going to go by and disinfect scales and disinfect wash racks periodically through the day. So we are going to do that. Between the two waves, we won't spray down the barn. There's just not time because it won't dry in time. We can get it sprayed, but the drying is really important. It's not going to dry in time, but the wash racks and scales and those things, we are going to try to do what we can. So maybe that'll help answer your question. A little bit from the reportability deal. Since I've been on the Texas A&M Health Commission, when that all came down was back in May and June when that thing really got pretty prevalent in the Midwest. There was a lot of pushback through the Midwest of big commercial operations that fought the reportability deal. They just didn't want people to know. They wanted to do their own business. The thing about the reason why I supported it, the thing that I really didn't understand until that all came about is Dr. Ellis, which is the state veterinarian, and the diagnostic lab didn't have the dialogue to know what was going on. It's kind of like a doctor-patient privacy deal, just like that deal. In other words, if we broke in our house and we sent feces to get tested and we were tested for PEDv, Dr. Ellis wasn't informed of it. It was just between us, maybe our vet, and the diagnostic lab. So this reportability has opened that up. I can assure you that from that office, we had our Animal Health Commission meeting yesterday morning. We have about 4 or 5 a year. We met yesterday morning. From that office, I can assure you the reportability deal isn't to get anybody in trouble. It is mainly to try to help. If you get, if you break these guys over here from the Health Commission, they may come visit you. They may work with a veterinarian. It's all to try to help people keep it, like you talked about, Dr. Davis talked about, having your plan, how to get things enacted and try to, keep it. It's not to go out and run a big deal that was going to report that Robbie Hartley's got PEDv, stay away. It's not that way at all. It's just to try to help producers. And the only way we can do that is from the standpoint we got to start. The state vet needs to know, our Animal Health Commission people need to know, and then we can all work together. So that's a little bit on the reportability deal. made us all use biosecurity and different things that should have been doing all along. It's just brought a lot of things forward. That, you know, I told those people up there at Amarillo, do everything you can think of to the point that you're just almost being anal about it, then it's probably not quite enough. Just like just like Dr. Daniel said, it's 10 times more than what you've ever done in the past. You know, if it's gonna happen, it's gonna happen. I mean, there's nothing going on right now that makes me believe that we're not going to be susceptible to it as much as we were last year. You know, there's predictions that we're going to have one of the wettest winters we've had in 10, 12 years. The one thing that virus thrives on is moisture and cold. That's what's so bad in the Midwest. I mean, once they got it, one thing, and we don't want to keep dwelling on just how easy this thing is spread, but just to give you one thing that I tell a lot of people that I think will help you understand. Here we have Stripes and Allsups and those kind of convenience stores. In the Midwest, they have a chain called Casey's. Iowa State University had some grad students run a study last year, and they went in a 50-mile radius of Ames, Iowa, and walked into Casey's and swabbed the floors. Just walked in, swabbed it, took it back and run a test on it. PEDv was in over 65% of every case at the window. So, it's in there, you walk in there and get it, you walk back. I mean, it's that scary deal. So all we can do, I mean, we didn't come here tonight to scare people. We just want everybody to be aware, just do everything that you can, from a sanitation standpoint. When you bring new pigs in, you're going to have to commingle them. There's a chance we can all get it. There really is. From a producer standpoint, like Josh talked, we've all changed things that we've done. We've tried to get people to make sure that when they come, we had a group of kids, there were 5 of them came Sunday morning to our house. And we were busy, we were trying to get some pigs delivered, this and that. And they had their GPS on the pickup, and they got lost. And they called, and I told them how to get there. And I said, now there's a sign in the driveway. Stop there, and we'll be right there. They drove right past the sign. Drove right out there to one of those buildings, and when I drove down there, they're out there walking around. Now, Will's a lot better natured than I am, because I sent him home. I went back down to my house, he's over on the trailer, and I said, that's your deal. And he went down there, and they moved their trucks, but damage is already done. Luckily, hopefully, we're okay, but be respectful of the breeders is the main thing. Just like Josh said, when, we at our house for the last 3 or 4 years, have had an open house. The Sunday afternoon, the ring success, we're not having that this time. Just can't take the chance anymore. Just be respectful. If you're going to go through the Midwest, if you're going to Josh's, if you're going anywhere, set up an appointment, try to be on time, wear clean clothes, be respectful of the guys that make their living raising pigs. When you bring them home, when you have an ag building, you're going to have to co-mingle those pigs. You may be great, you may make that last trip to Duncan, you might bring it in and give it to all of them. You just don't know. But if you get it, contain it, and try to work your way through it. We had the question asked up there, Dr. Gleason was on the panel up there, and the question was asked, do you think we should inoculate these pigs, 45 days before Fort Worth, give it to all of them? Nobody knows the answer to that. The thing I can tell you is from what my experience has been and what we've listened to and seen, you're going to have those chronic ones. And just like Denny asked that question, they don't ever get over it. And you don't know which one that's going to be. So, I can't answer that question whether that's something, these vaccines that have just come out, there's been millions of dollars thrown at these research to get a vaccine that'll work. And this Zoetis just now came up with one in the last 2 weeks. From what I've heard, when you give it to naive animals, it's probably not doing what we want it to do. If you give it to ones that's already had it, it's helping them build more antibodies faster. So, we don't know yet. So, questions?
Yeah, I have one. So you go to your place and buy a Showpigs, take it back. What is the amount of time you have a different pen, different area before you can really say, no, I'll got it.
Actually, I think 2 weeks.
Before
I think 2 weeks, if you don't have clinical signs, you're okay. If you go and buy several pigs and bring them to a certain deal, you can go and collect feces of all those pigs, mix it all together, send it off and get it tested, and you'll know real quick if you're okay or not, if you want to do that.
Can flies spread?
Can flies spread it? Oh, I'm sure they can. If it's airborne for 10 miles, I figure fly can spread it. The one thing else, I was on a conference call way back early when this whole thing was breaking out, and there was several vets on this one call, and this one vet that was in Iowa at the time had been to a commercial herd and actually inoculated a set of sows one particular day. It's a shower in, shower out deal. And so he showered in, went in there, and they gave PEDv to all these sows, and they give it to them, they shoot it in their mouth to make sure they all get it. Then he showered out, and he went home that night, showered again, and then he swabbed himself. He swabbed his nose, his mouth, his ears, his hands, and his feet. The only thing that was negative was his hands. It was everywhere else. And he asked a question on that call. He said, why were my hands clean and my feet weren't? I said, you didn't do a very good job in the shower. He said, you're exactly right. And this virus will stay on a human, they think, for about 4 days. That you can carry it. I mean, it's got to have the host of a hog to transmit, but it'll stay on a human for 4 days, they think right now. Just like Josh and I were talking, salt water and bleach does wonders. You ag teachers, if you have all your hogs, you've got an ag farm and then you've got pigs out in the country. I was just telling Robert, and actually Stanley started this discount years ago. And Mark and Robert do a really good job when they come tag. But, I told him, I said, take 2 buckets of screw-on lids, one with bleach in it. And I think Synergize is one of the very best. I said, even your snare, dip it bleach, dip it snare before you go to the next farm. You just don't know, so just take every precaution that you can.
I think that bleach breaks down real quick. I mean real quick. I think it is probably the least effective of any of them we have available.
And bleach is hard on anything that's got rubber in it. Constantly spraying on tires and vehicles and stuff, it'll eat tires up.
We got to work, last winter, every time we got to pick up or got out to pick up, we took that Tetrol and we just sprayed the dash, the floorboard, the steering wheel, everything we think of. Just even at the feed store, those girls every night when they shut down, we sprayed the floor, the counter, and where all people walk, Synergize every night, just trying to help. Because it's something we don't know nothing about.
Are they going to do something about the validation requirement to, they're not going to less stricken now, but are they going to take into consideration, how they had to come last year and another ag teacher from another town had to come walk through and look at every pig?
I don't have any idea. I don't think this probably going to change any of that at all. Because you can boot people up and hand sanitize people, and I don't think that'll affect it personally.
If this vaccine that's coming out, if it comes out, we need to vaccinate all the baby pigs before a sale, or what do we need to do?
No.
You just don't know because you don't know how vaccines work. Some vaccines make them incredibly sick, for 24 hours or whatever. We'll just have to wait and see. I don't think we're going to know quick enough this year. And like I said, they've been trying really hard for the last 9 months to come up with something and nothing's worked. So, I think if more than anything else is maybe something that when these pigs get to, get them all on feed, get maybe validation time. Vaccinate everyone when you validate or something. Maybe by then we'll know something.
The question like Jay was reiterating, this vaccine that's come out is labeled for pigs that have been exposed to this before. This vaccine is mostly, and I may be wrong, but made for them to try to maintain an existing resistance to this disease. That way, when they go in, they still have some resistance to it. It's not a modified live vaccine, so as far as vaccinating all your show pigs, it may not have a very good effect. It probably won't affect them. It's not engineered to actually infect the pig with the disease to build immunity. It's just to build antibodies in themselves that have carried it before to try to maintain that same level before farrowing. So as far as vaccinating all the show pigs, they haven't done enough research, or nobody knows yet. This is a whole new deal. Nobody knows. It's going to be a live and learn experience. So.
I do. I have a question. Once we find out, I guess, about this vaccine, and if we have a hog that comes down with this, this virus, and we give the vaccine, do you think they're going to come out with saying, "Oh, well, it's okay. Showtime comes. Will it come up? It won't come up as a drug or anything problematic. You know, it'll come out okay on a test for them."
It's not going to have a withdrawal. It's not going to affect that as far as testing at a show or anything like that. Because if they've already had it, what most tests are tested for is antibodies. So if they've had it, they're building antibodies. These vaccines are just trying to help them speed up building those antibodies.
Now, one thing is the talk of vaccines definitely brings promise to everybody when you think about it and you see the headlines. But one thing I think that's important is to probably not bank or worry about that, you know, and just continue to work on the preventative measures. Proper biosecurity, because we can almost guarantee that that's not going to, a vaccine's not going to be a safeguard for us, okay? And so, while there's talk and we promote it because we've had some gloomy times in the pork industry for the past year, and so when we do see these advances like this, it's certainly promising. But in all reality, we're nowhere near yet where we need to be.
Somebody said that if it's exposed to like 90-degree temperature, that'll kill it. I mean, so for example, if we had it on the farm.
On the temperature and time relationships, the studies have shown 10 minutes at 160 degrees inactivates the virus. Which, when we start talking, many of us might be unaware, but there's these kind of baking facilities, super, truck washes that have heaters, and you can get up to that temperature. There in the Midwest and some other places. But that's probably unrealistic again for us. The other time temperature relationship that is proved to inactivate the virus is 68 degrees for a period of 7 days. So 68 degrees at 7 days. Now, I will say this is, so that's why we say, okay, the warmer weather, we're going to be okay. Now, there hasn't been any research done to show the relationship of temperature that follows the course of a day, which, gosh, we've been 100 degrees where I'm at quite often. But still, yeah, we might now, of course, even be dipping down into the 60s. So you don't know if that time period right there does anything to affect the, the effectiveness of the time and temperature on the virus. But those are the two times that have been proven. 160 degrees, 10 minutes, 68 degrees, 7 days. That's why, again, it's very important to allow your equipment trailers to sit for ample time. That's why putting them out in the sun, if you're able to, people put them in their heated garages and stuff. And so when we talk about anything being able to transfer the virus if it's present on there, somebody gets a load of feed or supply shipped in, sometimes people have been putting it there in their garage that's heated and letting it sit before then they go and do anything with it. Just another measure based off of that time-temperature relationship.
Hey, did they ever decide if it could be spread in feed?
stuff come into this country was in feed. And some, you know, with it coming plasma, is really how they think it originally came. If you know anything about the way they process plasma, they cook it, and the fact that, you know, there's no way that that virus could have lived through that heat process in that. But in the handling process, you know, there was a, you know, forever and ever this last fall and actually into the winter, it was all in the commercial sector forever. And then about the time that Fort Worth come around, they started being Showpig guys break. The only common denominator that we could find through about 12 of those guys was they all fed one particular brand of feed. I don't think, honestly, truly, I think a human walking into a plant, got on some bags, and here we go. They actually, Moyers in Ohio had it early, and they tested feed, and it was negative, but it was on the feed bags. So that's one spot. Those guys did lots of tests to try to figure out where it come from, of course. So the only common denominator there was in one particular plant, and then it got spread from there. But I honestly think it could have been a guy walking in from his own 10-sow herb farm and spread it. So, but it can be transmitted in feed. It can be, the feed can be negative. It can be on the bag. I mean, yeah.
How much did it take, or what you put in to do that year to year? That's a good question.
I'll be honest, he asked about lagoons and whatnot, and the survivability of the virus and slurry and whatnot, it lasts. It has profound stability, actually. And so, honestly, in terms of being able to apply disinfectant into the lagoon or whatnot, I'm actually unsure, unaware of. When you think about the magnitude of it, I'm not sure, to tell you the truth. So that would be something that I haven't done enough reading on. Any more questions?
When is the video going to be available? Because I know there's not many actors here, and they're the ones that need to have this information. I called Aaron and he wasn't coming. So.
Mr. Scott?
And I'm not talking just isolating him, but
Steve is our A&M AgriLife extension computer specialist. So he can answer that.
Actually, y'all didn't realize, but the laptop I have in the front's been streaming it live right now. So when I stop recording, it's going to take approximately 4 hours to process, and then it'll be on the link for the Lubbock County Extension Office. But it's already being broadcasted live. The reason I have the camera in the back is a backup.
Will you put it on YouTube?
What we're
No.
going to do is, assuming everything goes okay, with the video,
It is on YouTube.
we're going to post the link to YouTube. It's going to be on our county Facebook page. It's Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Lubbock County. If you go to that page, the link will be on there once we have the link ready to post.
And one thing that I would say, since we are live, then, right? The information that's in the package that the people have here today, this evening, there's a handful on there of documents. One, what is PEDv in the basics, general biosecurity for non-farm individuals, a transportation biosecurity guide, and then there's one that we tried to make to fit the Showpig operations, and those that are buying Showpigs. There's that and one for validations. And so those are good within there. Those materials are available on the internet at Texas Pork's website, along with National Pork Board. They don't have a couple of the Showpig ones. They do have some others. as well. So going online, you can find a lot of resources as well there that can kind of help this out. I know that in our office, we've tried to get it out to ag teachers and extension agents and through various e-blasts and mail outs, and so trying to get it out to everybody. Any more questions?
I'd just like to thank our speakers, Jay and Brandon and Josh, and also Dr. Daniels, for helping put this together and coming and spending the time to help educate us. Also thanks to Steve Paz for doing the videoing and to Stanley for helping us get this facility in order to host it. So appreciate y'all attending, and you can look for the posting of that video. Just go to our Facebook page, and if you have trouble later on, call me and I'll be glad to direct you to it. Thank you.